Let me tell you something that might shake your spirit, but will also set you free. You've been looking around so much, you've stopped looking within. You've been checking everybody else's race, admiring their pace, their blessing, their breakthrough, and all the while the enemy has quietly stolen your focus. And the longer you focus on what's happening in their house, the more disordered your own becomes. The distraction of comparison is one of the enemy's slickest tools. It doesn't roar like a lion, it whispers like a serpent. It doesn't always show up loud and obvious. It's subtle, quiet, and deadly. You don't even notice it creeping in. One minute you're excited about your calling, fired up about your vision, and the next minute you're scrolling through someone else's highlight reel, wondering if your pace is too slow, your reach is too small, or your journey is too messy. And just like that, your focus shifts from your mission to someone else's milestones. Let me tell you something real. You will never fulfill your purpose if you're constantly peeking over the fence to measure your progress against someone else's plot. You can't plant in your garden while coveting theirs. And if you do, don't be surprised when your soil turns dry, your harvest weak, and your spirit discouraged. Comparison is a slow poison. It drains your joy, blinds your perspective, and ultimately robs you of the very thing God uniquely designed for you. I've seen it in my own life and ministry. Early on, I'd show up full of passion with a word burning in my chest. But then I'd look around at the platform of others, at their resources, at the number of seats they filled. And the enemy would start whispering, "You're not doing enough. You're not big enough. You're not fast enough." And instead of running my race, I started tripping over my own feet. Not because I wasn't called, but because I was distracted. You see, the moment you compare, you disconnect from your anointing. God didn't call you to replicate, He called you to reflect His glory in a way that only you can. And when you fix your eyes on the wrong focus, you start questioning the very identity He gave you. The gifts that once felt powerful start to feel small. The vision that once set you on fire starts to feel foolish. And that's not because the calling changed, it's because your focus did. Comparison doesn't just cost time, it costs trust. Trust in who God made you to be. Trust in the process He's taking you through. Trust in the lane He carved out just for you. Because here's the truth, God is not obligated to bless who you're pretending to be or who you're trying to keep up with. He blesses the authentic, the aligned, the ones who are faithful to their own assignment, not someone else's applause. So the question becomes, who are you watching? Who are you letting influence your value? Is your focus shaped by the word or by the world? Because what you behold, you begin to mirror. If all you do is measure yourself by what others are doing, you will live perpetually dissatisfied even in seasons of success. Because comparison feeds discontentment. It causes you to miss the miracles in your midst because you're obsessed with someone else's chapter 10 while you're still on chapter 3. There's power in focus. When you fix your attention inward on your walk, your work, your word, you begin to silence the noise around you. And as the distractions fade, clarity rises. You start to see not just what God is doing for others, but what He's already doing in you, because He is working. But you have to stop looking side to side long enough to see it. So hear this. Your lane is holy, your pace is perfect, your calling is consecrated, and when you keep your eyes on your own assignment, heaven backs you up. Comparison is a thief, but focus is a force. And the moment you reclaim your focus, everything starts to shift, not because the world changes, but because you do. When your soul, your mind, and your spirit come into alignment, everything around you begins to respond differently. See, most people are trying to fix external chaos while living with internal confusion. They're trying to organize the outside while the inside is disordered. But let me tell you something, nothing on the outside can fall into place until you allow God to bring order to the inside. Alignment is not just about structure, it's about surrender. And when you bring your heart, your habits, and your hope into agreement with God's truth, you become a magnet for divine movement. You ever tried driving a car that's out of alignment? It's exhausting. You're constantly adjusting the wheel, pulling against a drift, and wearing down your tires faster than they should be. And isn't that how life feels when your soul isn't anchored in truth? When your thoughts run wild and your spirit's disconnected from the source. You keep pushing forward, but everything feels heavier than it should. That's what happens when you're out of alignment. Not because you're not trying, but because you're trying without flow. Now imagine if your soul, the seat of your emotions, was no longer controlled by every disappointment or distraction. Imagine if your mind, the battlefield where fear and faith wrestle, was renewed daily with truth that silences the lies. Imagine if your spirit, the part of you most connected to God, was leading instead of lagging. When those three parts of you begin to walk in step, you don't just move, you move with power. But it takes intentionality. Internal alignment isn't automatic, it's a decision daily. You've got to choose what you meditate on. You've got to monitor your self-talk. You've got to be ruthless about what you allow into your spirit. Because just like your body needs alignment to walk properly, your purpose needs alignment to manifest fully. And you can't be in purpose while living in pieces. I've seen it happen over and over again. People chasing results while neglecting their roots. They want better outcomes, but they don't want to examine their inner world. They want fruit, but they ignore the soil. And then they wonder why nothing's growing. But when you slow down and say, Lord, no, before I chase another goal, align my heart with yours, something begins to shift. You stop hustling and start flowing. You stop stressing and start trusting. Your life doesn't get easier, but it gets lighter. Because now your movements are led by conviction, not confusion. This is where peace lives, not in perfection, but in alignment. When your soul is settled, your mind is focused, and your spirit is lit by God's presence, you become dangerous in the best kind of way. You walk into rooms with clarity. You face storms with steadiness. You move in purpose without the need for constant validation, because you're no longer trying to keep up. You're simply keeping in step. And that's when everything around you starts to fall into place, not because circumstances magically change, but because you're no longer fragmented. You're whole, you're rooted, you're aligned. And when the inside is in order, the outside has no choice but to follow suit. God's blueprint for your life is personal. It's not a copy, it's custom. It wasn't drafted from someone else's success story. It was designed specifically for you, crafted by the Creator with intention, with precision, and with purpose. And that's why focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. Because if you're constantly watching what everyone else is doing, you'll never hear the unique instructions heaven has written with your name on them. You've got to understand, God didn't create you to live in someone else's narrative. He didn't call you to mimic their moves, adopt their path, or duplicate their pace. He called you to be faithful with your assignment. That means you've got to get quiet enough, focused enough, surrendered enough to hear the rhythm of your own divine design. Because your purpose isn't in the crowd. It's in the closet. It's in the stillness. It's in the moments where you stop performing and start listening. We live in a culture that wants to rush everything, move fast, scale fast, post more, push harder. But kingdom purpose doesn't move by algorithms, it moves by alignment. And you can't align with God's plan if you're consumed with theirs. See, when you start chasing what was never meant for you, you'll miss what's already waiting for you. Because God's blueprint isn't loud, it's layered, and it unfolds in steps, not in spotlight. I remember when I was first stepping into my calling, I was tempted to take shortcuts. I looked at others and thought, well, they're doing it that way, maybe I should too. And every time I tried to imitate someone else's method, it felt heavy. It felt forced. And God had to remind me, you're trying to build something holy with blueprints that aren't yours. That moment changed everything. I went from chasing to trusting, from proving to obeying. That's what some of us need to hear today. Obedience is greater than imitation. Just because it worked for them doesn't mean it was meant for you. Just because it looks good doesn't mean it's God. And sometimes the very thing delaying your breakthrough is your refusal to let go of the false version of success you've been clinging to. You keep praying for clarity, but clarity won't come until you release comparison. Focusing on yourself means going back to the basics. Lord, what did you put in my hands? What do I have to steward, to grow, to develop, to build? Because what's in your hands right now is enough to start walking in purpose. You don't need their platform. You don't need their approval. You need faith, you need focus, and you need the courage to trust that God didn't make a mistake when he gave you that vision. Your journey might not make sense to others. It might be slower. It might be quieter. It might even look strange. But if it's his blueprint, it will carry his blessing. And when you're walking in divine design, you don't have to force outcomes. You flow in them. You don't have to chase validation. You walk in authority. So stop looking around. Stop trying to fit into molds that were never made for you, and start digging deep into what God has uniquely called you to do. The blueprint is personal. The promise is real, and the more you focus on what's inside of you, the more heaven will align everything around you. When you focus on yourself in the way God intended, not through the lens of pride, but through the lens of purpose, you step into a sacred process called divine development. See, God isn't in a rush. He's not moved by deadlines, pressure, or public opinion. He's moved by alignment, by obedience, by surrender. And when you stop trying to perform for the world and start allowing the Holy Spirit to transform your inner world, everything begins to change, not instantly, but intentionally. You've got to understand, development is God's love in motion. It's him saying, before I give you more, I want to make sure you can carry it. Before he enlarges your territory, he strengthens your character. Before he promotes you, he prepares you. And that preparation happens not on the stage, but in the shadows. Not in the applause, but in the quiet places where nobody sees the sacrifice, the pruning, the pressing. That's where power is born. When you truly begin to focus on yourself, on your discipline, your thinking, your heart posture, you allow God to do his deepest work. Because God won't develop who you're pretending to be. He develops the real you, the one who's broken and bold, flawed and faithful, tired and still trying. And that development doesn't always feel good, but it always produces good. The word tells us in Romans 5:3-4 that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. So every delay, every detour, every season of silence is doing something in you. The problem is we want destiny without development. We want elevation without endurance. But God doesn't operate on hype. He operates on holiness. And holiness is formed in the fire of becoming. When you take the time to focus inward and let him refine what's impure, heal what's wounded, and rebuild what's been broken, you come out not just with results, but with revelation. You come out knowing who you are, whose you are, and why you're here. That's what divine development does. It gives you roots before it gives you reach. It teaches you how to sustain what you've been praying for. It matures your faith so that the blessing doesn't destroy you when it finally arrives. Because the worst thing that can happen is to be given something too soon, something you haven't been prepared to hold. But when you focus on becoming the kind of person who can carry favor with integrity, God can trust you with more. I've seen it in my own life. The seasons I wanted to skip were the very seasons that shaped me. The moments I thought were setbacks were the moments God was strengthening my foundation. And when I stopped resisting the development and started embracing it, my life started to grow, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. That's the secret most people miss. God promotes what he's prepared. He anoints what has been aligned. And when you focus on the work he's doing in you, he begins to release the work he wants to do through you. So don't despise the process. Don't rush the timing. Just stay committed to your development, because the deeper the roots, the greater the fruit. And when divine development has had its full work in you, everything that's meant for you will begin to fall into place, because you'll finally be ready to carry it.